Alright, so a few weeks ago, Norman Reedus did state that the ending of Daryl Dixon Season 2 is going to be insane, and in his opinion, it's the greatest thing to come out of The Walking Dead, and it's like the craziest thing ever. So in today's video, I'm just going to be discussing about that, what could we possibly see, and how could this ending lead up to Season 3. So please stay tuned. And now, before we actually get into the video, I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I would like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. Okay, now as we all know, Daryl Dixon Season 2 is releasing at the end of September. And Norman Reedus did say that the ending of Season 2 specifically is going to be crazy. And now with The Ones Who Live ending a couple of months back, and also on top of that, having Season 3 in the works, I think that they could link it somehow. And a lot of people are saying that Rick could have a cameo in Daryl Dixon Season 2, and I think that that is very possible. It's because Rick Grimes is finally back, so now they won't be afraid to use him or even say his name in anything anymore. So like how it was in The Walking Dead Season 11 and just the spin-offs before The Ones Who Live came out, they were just really afraid to use Rick's name or even mention him. They did, like, you know, drop hints to him, they didn't mention him, but they didn't like mention him by name all that much. So I think that having Rick Grimes show up in Season 2 of Daryl Dixon, I think that that is a very good possibility to happen. Now with Daryl Dixon having a Season 3, in what way could Rick show up? And now one way that Rick could show up is that he could be at the Commonwealth and he could possibly talk to Daryl through like through radio, right? You know, like he could come into contact with Daryl somehow and just tell him that he's alive and he's back at the Commonwealth. So that could be one way to look at it. Or there could be a possible CRM connection. And of course, as we know, in The Ones Who Live, the CRM was taken down, quote unquote, but there is still a chance for the CRM to come back. So maybe they have some sort of link in France, because Major General Beale did state that, you know, CRM like agents are all around the world in different communities. So we could have some sort of CRM link there. The people that don't know that Major General Beale is dead and the CRM changed. So yeah, like, you know, one of my theories is that the CRM could have some sort of link and Rick Grimes could come into contact with Daryl. And now another reason why I think this is possible is because a couple of months back, almost a year back, we have a picture of Norman Reedus and Andrew Lincoln on set together, right? You know, they took a picture together and, you know, like that was on the set of The Ones Who Live. So that just means that, you know, Norman Reedus did come just to say hi to Andrew Lincoln. But it is very possible that they shot some scenes of Daryl Dixon there as well. And in Season 2, of course, Carol is in this season. So maybe by the end of Season 2, they make it back to America and maybe Daryl comes across a CRM base and maybe he sees it blowing up from the distance, right? Like we could possibly see the finale of The Ones Who Live through Daryl's perspective, but he just isn't able to catch Rick and Michonne because they're wearing masks. So yeah, probably Daryl just kept his distance and he saw the explosion, just the CRM going down. And the reason and the way that this scene would have significance is if Daryl already knew what the CRM was from beforehand. So again, like how I mentioned before, the CRM could have some sort of link in France, which could lead him back to America. And of course, he could see that explosion firsthand, and we could see this whole scene play out in Daryl's point of view. And in my opinion, that would be the only way to make this scene incredibly crazy and hype. And of course, Norman Reedus could be saying this due to some sort of a marketing scheme or just to get people hype. But I don't think he's the type of person to give people false hope and just to get them excited for no reason. So I think there is truth to his word. And the only way to make this scene and just this event play out and make it very hype is if Rick Grimes shows up in some sort of way. And that's also linking back to Daryl Dixon Season 1, where Carol did say that someone came back, and with Rick going back to the Commonwealth and Alexandria, it is very likely that Carol said Rick came back. So we could be seeing some sort of flashback scene of Rick and Carol's reunion, and Carol letting Rick know that, Daryl's not here. So maybe even Rick went to go looking for Daryl also, right? Like how Daryl was looking for Rick, maybe Rick also went to look for Daryl. And maybe the final scene of this season could be that Rick shows up in France, right? Rick comes into France, and then season 3 of Daryl Dixon is a Carol, Daryl, and Rick season, right? Like this could be a potential The Ones Who Live season 2, but they just made it into Daryl Dixon season 3, and they have Rick Grimes showing up in this and them having their moments in France with running walkers and stuff like that. I think that that'd be very hype, because I don't think that Carol would only go alone. And on top of that, if Rick came back, I don't think Rick is the type of person just to stand back and just to wait for Daryl to come. I think he would go himself as well after hearing that Daryl has been looking for Rick for years. So, basically like as returning the favor type of thing, I think Rick might show up in Daryl Dixon season 2 at the very end, and he's gonna show up in France and appear in front of Daryl, and we're finally gonna have that reunion scene. Maybe this final scene that Norman Reedus is talking about is the long-awaited Rick and Daryl reunion scene. And now another way that they can make this scene very crazy is that if they added a new variant, and of course this wouldn't be insanely crazy, because again, like the running walker is by far the most hype variant, right? And just having a running walker and also them showing up in World Beyond, I think that was the best way to execute a walker variant. But if they find some sort of way to show a scene where the variant walkers make their way to America and the Commonwealth, I think that would be another way to have a very crazy scene, is to have running walkers infiltrate America and to make their way to the Commonwealth, and just have that final scene of the walls of the Commonwealth and having walkers running towards it. And that's probably another way to have a cameo scene of Rick and a lot of other characters, is that just them looking at these variants and it just cuts to black right there. I think that would be a very cool way to end off season 2 as well. And now there was a rumor that season 3 of Daryl Dixon is going to be taking place in Spain. And with Norman Reedus saying this, I thought back to that rumor, and I just want to say something insanely crazy, which it might not be possible, but at the same time it could be very well possible. And that's if Rick's brother shows up at the end of season 2. And now for those of you who don't know, Rick Grimes actually does have a brother. His name is Jeff Grimes. And this was only in the comics, right? Jeff showed up in one issue of the comics. And he's, of course, in Spain. And now with Daryl Dixon season 3 taking place in Spain, it is very well possible that Jeff could show up and, he could mention his name to Daryl, right? Like the very last scene of season 2 could be just Daryl running into Jeff, or both of them already knowing each other, and then he just says his last name, right? Like, my name is Jeff Grimes, and then it just cuts to black there. I think that would be another crazy moment for people who don't know that Rick has a brother, and also they weren't too clear on that in the Walking Dead main show. So it'd be very cool to implement Rick's brother in live action and to have him have a story with Daryl, and Daryl would be very protective of Rick's brother, because of course he thinks to himself that he wasn't able to save Rick and he wasn't able to protect him. So protecting his brother could be another way of righting his wrongs, in his opinion. And I think that would be a very cool storyline for Daryl to protect and just stay by Rick's brother's side. And another possibility is that Rick's brother, like Jeff, he could be a head of a community in Spain. And now, whether or not this community is good or bad, it all depends. Because, again, if this community is good, then of course they would help Daryl get back to Spain, and maybe Jeff comes with Daryl and Rick and Jeff do have a reunion. Or if the community is bad, Daryl would be forced to kill Rick's brother, and then he would have to break the news to Rick that I met your brother, he was alive during all of this, he was the head of a community, but I was forced to kill him. I think that would be a very cool storyline as well. But again, like, you know, this crazy scene could be anything at the end of the day, right? It could be nothing at all, right? I mean, this could just be a way just to get hype and eyes on the show. But I think the most likely scenario is that Rick Grimes shows up at the end of this season, and whether or not they have the reunion, I think that it would be very, very hyped to see Rick just showing up in Daryl Dixon season 2 and just teasing a reunion, because again, like in The Ones Who Live, we did have a reunion of Rick and Michonne, and also Rick with his kids. So if Rick shows up in Daryl Dixon season 2 in any way, that basically confirms that they're gonna have the reunion. And I think that they might have the reunion either at the end of season 3, if season 3 is the very last one, or if you go very out there with the theories, I personally think that maybe Rick ends up in France as well, and he reunites with Daryl at the very last scene of season 2, right? Like how in season 1, like the ending of season 1 of Daryl Dixon, Carol shows up, but she is not necessarily reunited with Daryl yet. Maybe we could get a scene of Rick going to France and him tracking down Daryl. I think that that'd be very cool as well. And also Rick having that experience from the CRM as a soldier. Maybe he might be very good at tracking people down now, and he could get to Daryl faster. So yeah, like I personally think that Rick showing up in the show is the most likely outcome, and this is exactly what Norman Reedus is talking about. But if Rick and Daryl have the reunion, then I don't know what's the point of season 3 of Daryl Dixon, unless if it's taking place in America, but I don't see that happening as well, because again, if all these characters are in one place together, you might as well have a crossover spin-off. But yeah, like I think that it could be like some sort of radio thing, right? Maybe Daryl hears Rick's voice at the end, right? Like he hears his voice, like how he heard Carol's voice saying that someone came back. Maybe we could hear Rick's voice saying that, Daryl, I'm back, you gotta come back, right? You gotta come back to the Commonwealth, something very bad is happening. Or he could just let Daryl know that, you know, he's alive. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really, really appreciate it. And like how I mentioned in the start of the video, I would like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching.